warm welcome to the Irish Angle, our weekly discussion show in association with AK Bets. First of all, now I'd like to welcome Emma Nagel and Johnny Ward, who are here with me this week. Three of us are going to discuss all the things that happened in the last week. Johnny, Emma, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Vinny.
Vincent.
Now, Emma, did you go to Croke Park yesterday to see poor old Cork?
I did. Still licking the wounds a bit on that one, to be honest. Unfortunately, Cork hurlers, they're a bit more like, who would I say, a bit more brave man's game than Gallup and Deschamps. It's hard to see him coming back from that now. It was a tough day for a Cork fan, but I suppose, look, you have to give the credit to Tip. And the fact I'm living in Tipperary now means I'll probably have to give the credit to them as well, because I'll get a fair slag otherwise.
Yeah, it was incredible. A game of two halves, as they say. I've never seen that like it. I thought at half time, I thought it was all over. Cork were going to win it easy. 6 points up and cruising. And then all of a sudden, they didn't turn up in the second half. Strange one.
Yeah, it was total capitulation. I couldn't believe it. Like, to be honest, I thought we were a bit fortunate to be up in the first half, like up by 6 points. Like, they didn't really, like, from start to finish, they never really played the game. But the second half was like to score 2 points in the second half of an All-Ireland final. Like, it's beyond belief, really. What we unfortunately saw it twice this year against Limerick. Earlier on in the championship as well, and they just didn't show up for whatever reason in that second half anyway in particular. But look, sure, we live to fight another day, I suppose.
Yeah, and the poor old Tipperary people couldn't get there to see it. Every ticket seemed to be Cork, wasn't it? I've never seen nothing like it. The difference between the two sets of supporters, it looked like it was about 8/10 of the place. Yeah. Cork supporters all in their red.
Yeah, we left. We left at about. The lads left at 5:30 from Cork, and I met them at 6:30 in Cashel. So we went up and we got a spot there in the Gresham, and we sat down. It's one of the places that serve the early pints, I suppose, at the hotel. And God, I don't think there was. There might have been the odd Tipperary supporter, but everyone that walked in saw the Cork crowd and walked back out again. It was a sea of red. In fairness, I'm not sure how, but everyone at Cork seemed to manage to get their hands on all those extra tickets going around. So look, there was a great following, but it wasn't our day, unfortunately.
Yeah, they even did the same against Dublin in the semis. I couldn't understand that, how the Dublin supporters couldn't even get tickets for their own game. But anyway, we'll move on. Lots of racing things to discuss from the last week. And I suppose one of the biggest ones was John and Tady Gosden. There was a fine for the pair of them. $3,000 they got fined over a positive test, or a number of positive tests, for a drug called ketamine, which is used as an anesthetic for horses when they're getting operated on. But it's also used by humans as a recreational drug. And basically, it turned out that a girl in the yard put her hands up and said it was her who was taking the drug, and that's how the horse got a cross-contamination, or the horses did. What did you make of this, Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is way above my pay grade in terms of, like, even reading your blog about this today, how this shows, I suppose, the complexities of the authorities trying to deal with cases of drugs in horse racing. And it's fair to say a lot of people, subsequent to Jim Bulger's unsubstantiated remarks and Paul Kimmage drawn out a Lance Armstrong comparison and all that sort of stuff, it's fair to say I still feel that a lot of people are skeptical about drugs in racing. But you talk to people in racing and people that I would genuinely believe, and there's a feeling that the Jim Bulger stuff is damaging for racing, and generally there is not a drug problem in racing. And I've never been able to fully, I suppose, come to terms with how much there is an issue with drugs in racing. This is just very strange, this case, because it's basically, as you describe it, your blog describes it very nicely, Vinny. It's what's, I suppose, strange is that you'd have two instances of ketamine, which I think I've come across ketamine once in social circles in my life. And as you say in your blog, cannabis and coke are the go-to drugs in Kildare, and I'd you can see, and even I'm in my 40s now, but you can certainly see, like, cocaine is very prevalent in Ireland. But it does seem just quite incredible, really, that two completely different people in the space of 4 years were involved in John Gosden's yard and were recreational or otherwise users of ketamine, and that basically resulted in horses being contaminated. So it's all a bit mad. I mean, ketamine is obviously a very, very powerful tranquilizer. It's been used for horses for a long, long time. It puts you into a sedative state and you're alive, but you kind of can't feel what you're doing. And it's very, very strong. Humans, as you say, use it to get high. But I thought it was just a perplexing case. And, this employee who came forward, she was the groom looking after one of the horses in question. I mean, it's she's done herself no favors in terms of her reputation, and she's been very honest to come forward and do this, as was the person in 2021. I'm kind of waffling here, but like I just find the whole thing very, very perplexing, to be honest with you.
Well, if we come back to one of the things here, if we go back to the case from 2020, he was fined. John Gosden himself was fined in 2021 just fined 500 quid because a guy working in the yard came along a number of weeks after the initial thing blew up, and he came along and he said, look, he put his hands up and he said, I took ketamine, took it on occasions, wasn't a regular user like the girl who put her hands up this time, but he said he used it on occasions. He said he'd used it 2 weeks before he'd brought the horse to the races, and that when he'd bought the ketamine or had it, I presume it comes in a bag. I don't know. It seems like people snort it. I'm not quite sure. There seems to be different ways they can take it, but let's take it. It's in a bag. He put the bag in his wallet. Then he took the ketamine. 2 weeks later, he thinks there might have been some residue from the ketamine still in his wallet. He goes to the races with the horse. He takes out his credit card or cash card to buy something at the races, and he thinks he may have got some flecks of the ketamine or some dust from it or whatever on his hands from the residue, and that was enough to make a horse test positive 2 weeks after the fella had taken the ketamine. If that's true, if we take all that on face value, this is a ridiculous issue for the industry, isn't it? If you've got people all through society taking drugs like this, and if they only have to come in contact with a horse at any stage, the horse will test positive. So you can imagine even at a race meeting, you have horses there in the winner's enclosure and all the connections coming in and hugging and kissing the horse. The horse gets tested afterwards. There's a chance any of these people could have ketamine, never mind someone working in the yards. Is that true, Emma?
Yeah, it's just bizarre, really. To be honest, I haven't really. I don't think I've ever seen ketamine used. I know it is used as a tranquilizer for horses, but I personally haven't seen it used. Like there's other, obviously similar drugs that might have been used instead, but I'm not sure how prevalent it is, or I'm not sure what the right word is. But to think that a horse could get contaminated so easy, like you said, is worrying, because in that first case was particularly bizarre. Like the fact that the horse could get contaminated just from residue from his fingers that was rubbed off a credit card. It's mind-boggling, really. And I think the Gosdens spoke about it, that they kind of identified that there might have been a problem with staff in the yard, and they were kind of putting measures in to kind of correct that. And look, like Johnny said, I think drug use is a massive issue in both Ireland and the UK, and probably in racing in particular, in certain circumstances. And I suppose it's kind of up to trainers in one regard, depending on the individual circumstances, to maybe safeguard their employees in a way. But yeah, it's just a bizarre case, and for it to happen so easily, that contamination, and for it to still be in the horse's system as well. It's I can't really wrap my head around it, to be honest. But it's not really. I don't know what the withdrawal times even are for ketamine, to be honest. It's not an equine tranquilizer that I'd be familiar with at all. But it's just bizarre, really.
But just on the whole larger scale going forward, if we take everything from this case at face value, so that basically someone who has taken ketamine at some point can go to a horse, touch the horse will test positive for it. But obviously it's a trace element that's found in the sample. So we're not dealing with a horse here that was tranquilized in any way, didn't even notice it, I'm sure. And it didn't seem to affect the two horses that they originally sampled this time in the Gosden yard. One of them was after winning a race as well. So obviously it hadn't been tranquilized in any way. So when we're dealing with these trace elements, Johnny, is there a case for saying, look, maybe they don't go through the whole process? It's not like you've got steroids in a horse, or like a Viking horde down in Tramore where a horse has been drugged to stop it winning or whatever. We're dealing with very trace elements here that don't affect the performance of the horse. So should they really go into all this procedural stuff around it and take months and months to sort out these cases? Is there not bigger fish to fry here somewhere?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I had a small but talented trainer get on to me last year. He wanted to talk about Lynn Hillier and the turf club, and this particular issue, like where you're dealing with cases that have such small quantities that it's really kind of a mountain out of a molehill. And if you're talking about, if this is actually true what happened here, in terms of a recreational user, and minute levels, you're talking about somebody basically being a prolific smoker who's just inhaled a little bit in a smoking area. It's not comparable. And I get what you're saying. I suppose like they are looking at it, but it just seems to be an awful lot of effort into something that just doesn't seem to weigh up to very much.
Yeah, well, it seems as if this case or these type of cases in Ireland and the UK, they seem to get as heavy a treatment from the authorities as a steroid case would be, or whatever else, something very serious that we know affects the performance of horses. So, like, is it worth that, Emma, to go through all this processes every time, or do you think that's what needs to be done to show it's cleaner than clean and everything else?
Look, I suppose you can kind of see both sides of it. As far as I'm aware, like the IHRB, anyway, I know that they do release, if there is a positive drug test, they release, how much of it was in the horse's system when they were tested. And, if it's, a tiny trace, I mean, the penalty is going to be much less severe as if, the horse was administered the drug on very close to the race day or whatever like that. So, look, I think I don't have any issues with the way that the testing is done in racing. I think, it has to be done to ensure everything's clean. And, even if it is a very small trace of a drug, the IHRB have very strict tracing of, medical registers and things like that now as well. So they kind of want to know what every horse got whenever they got it. And like, I suppose it's trainer's responsibility to just keep track of their withdrawal times and all that. Look, there is a few cases now where the withdrawal time of a drug might not be totally foolproof, and might stay in a certain horse's system for a bit longer than it was expected, and you would feel sympathy for connections in those cases. But look, apart from that, if it is a minor discretion where it's only a trace of a drug found in the horse system, I think the authorities normally take that into consideration, in fairness, in their penalties, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose they do in the penalties, but they still go through the whole same process to try and get to that point. And it's using up a huge amount of resources, having to send people off to whatever yard to check all the horses in it and do all the different hair follicle tests and send them off. I'm sure it costs a fortune. So ultimately, I've no problem with them trying to find any drug use within the sport. But at the same time, if they're using a lot of the resources on very minor cases, it's obviously leaving less resources available for the bigger cases and to sort it out and more testing. Like I'm on about this for the last couple of years. If there is a problem, which you have the Jim Bulgers and other people in the world, the Paul Kimmages seem to think there is, why not just go and do a hair follicle test on every single racehorse in Ireland? Surely we could do that over a 6-month period. And then we know for definite that there is, whatever the problem is, 1 in every 10 horses has had whatever drugs it is, or maybe none. So at least we'd know definitively, rather than taking all these one at a time ones over the time, and it never gets us a clear answer, is what I seem to think. Anyway, we'll move on to last week's racing. We had some good stuff, both Killarney and, of course, the big meeting, the Oaks meeting at the Curragh. What did you make of that, Johnny? The Oaks meeting, particularly on Saturday, it was a cracking card as such, with all the Group 2s and Group 1 race. And we even had a dual winner of the Oaks, the English and Irish Oaks from Mini Hawk. But small enough fields, wasn't as competitive as I would have liked to have seen. What about you?
I suppose this was a contrast to the Derby in that we'd all these group races on Oaks Day. I mean, the Oaks itself wasn't a race that really got me excited at all. And Mini Hawk, she was 2-11 in the race. It's kind of strange if you turn on the news and you're like 2-11 beat 7-2 in a race in which, I guess the bookmakers were obviously taking evasive action, and the real odds of the runner-up wouldn't have been 7-2, and it was a 7-horse race as well, which was kind of unusual because it wasn't a really, really rampantly bad each way price we might take the long way, but she was the only horse that was I suppose capable of putting it up to Mini Hawk, who really did look like she took time to get going, and it wasn't a great performance. I mean, and it wasn't a terrific renewal of the race either, but maybe these middle distance horses they just are what they are at the moment. It's incredible looking at the arc betting right now, because the horse that I'd nearly take out of the weekend and with the view to the arc would be Alarifa, who I think is worth a shot at it anyway, but I'm not sure if he's actually really planning to go there. He's 66-1. He has an option in the race, but obviously he's the Melbourne Cup and the Ledger as well. And Mini Hawk herself now, who's kind of nearly favourite, but 14-1 or so for the arc, has obviously other options as well. I was really impressed with True Love in the Railway Stakes. Like, I felt Puerto Rico was a promising maiden who I really felt he should be able to put it up to her. And obviously you have Power Blue, who is highly rated in third. But I'm not getting. I was actually on to Andy Holding this morning, who does speed figures, and True Love apparently didn't. She didn't wow the clock watchers at all. And I'm just speaking to Ed O'Brien. He's or kind of. I just asked him this morning about her and her plans. She's going to the Cheveley Park, and they were kind of seeing what you get to 6 furlongs. But there doesn't seem to be like I don't know, even reading Aidan O'Brien's comments the weekend, he wasn't like absolutely shouting from the rooftops about her. So I'm sort of not sure what to make of that race. And obviously the fact that they ran a maiden who was really friendless in the betting, obviously the Coolmore / Ballydoyle connections or whoever was backing the horse could not see True Love being beaten by Puerto Rico. Go Atletico then in the Scurry was a great result for Ado McGuinness. You know, Ado has I suppose himself and Stephen Thorne have gone their separate ways in recent years. He's kind of rebuilding the yard a bit as well, and he's gotten a nice couple of sort of 2-year-olds coming in, but he still has these good handicappers with the view to Galway. And Go Atletico was a very good result, but it probably wasn't like across the group races on the card on Saturday. There probably weren't real stars. I did think Al Rifa was very, very good. Like, you know, Wootton Bassett's done incredibly well the last few sort of months this season. It's been a real revelation of a season for him. This was a 1.6 miles. It was a slowly run renewal of the Curragh Cup, but he absolutely battered Shackleton and likes of Harbour Wind, who's not a bad horse. Really battered them. And I don't know what you think, but like for Joseph O'Brien, I would definitely be. I know the Melbourne Cup looks with the aim, but I would definitely be looking at the arc for this horse. You know, he's for me, he's more than entitled to take his chance, particularly when it's such an opal renewal this year. But I suppose he was the one maybe to take out at the weekend.
Yeah, what did you make of it, Emma? There was the other New Zealand and Isaac Newton. A nose between them as well, Aidan, a 1, 2, 3 in that race. He had a good weekend overall, and so did Ryan Moore. But what struck you about it?
Yeah, definitely a good weekend for Ballydoyle. Yeah, Elrif going back for the arc could be interesting. To be fair, it was a good performance from him. It's hard to take away from what he did on the day. He was obviously well enough beaten in the arc last year. But look, maybe you could make excuses for him and try and go back for it again. But it sounded as if maybe the Ledger and, like Johnny said, the Melbourne Cup, which Joseph likes to target, is probably on the agenda for him as well. But I thought of the arc, like Mini Hawk, favour for that now. Yeah, the Oaks was a bit underwhelming, to be honest. A small field, which, you know, not many of them you could really make a realistic case for on the day. I suppose that the 1-2 out of it was predictable. Mini Hawk, obviously 2 to 11 favourite, well clear on ratings. It was a big run from Joseph's filly. We might take the long way. She bounced back to put it up to Mini Hawk, in fairness. But I just think Mini Hawk is probably a filly who, you know, we saw it when she won the Cheshire Oaks back in May. Like she kind of, I'd say, runs to whatever's beside her. I'd say, you know, she's not massively exuberant. Kind of like, I'd say you could probably upgrade that performance a little bit even again. So look, her going to the arc could be interesting. It sounded as if they weren't totally sure, but maybe they might have been preferring that. Aidan was saying she might possibly go for a trial over in France for the arc. So look, she looks a real good filly, and she's a dual Oaks winner. And even though maybe it wasn't the best renewal, she still will go down in history as a dual Oaks winner, and no one can take that away from her. Look, one look, I suppose, was good winning on the Sunday, the Meadow Court Stakes. She's a filly who loves she absolutely loves the Curragh, and stepping up to 10 furlongs for the first time. She saw it out really well, in fairness. So she had gone 9.5 last year in Goran, but flew home, and look, she's just a really likeable filly. I suppose she kind of maybe struck a bit of a chord with the public when she blasted home in the Gops Million on her debut, and maybe slightly underwhelming as a 3-year-old at the start of the year, but found her groove then towards the back end, and she's a real good 4-year-old this year for Connections, in fairness, and look, they'll have plenty of fun with her. But True Love, like Johnny mentioned, was really impressive winning that. The Railway Stakes, moving that, like, you'd have to say hasn't been a massive success for the Curragh. Like, they moved it away from Derby weekend in the hope of attracting Ascot 3-year-olds. Look, in fairness, the winner obviously did come from Ascot, but only 2 of them showed up from Ascot in the end, like a 4-runner race. A 1 to 2 on favourite. We had the fifth from the Coventry in there as well, from the Amor Racing team. But look, it hasn't been a massively successful decision from the Curragh to move the Railway Stakes. So you'd wonder will they think about moving it back again to the Derby card? But look, it was maybe not the most I suppose rip roaring weekend of action at the Curragh, but still I think we saw some good performances from some of the better horses.
The Railway, Vinny's, it's quite informative, I think, to look at the race throughout the last 20 odd years. When Rocket Gibraltar won it in 2001, I suppose, so at the start of the century, and then you had George Washington, Holy Roman Emperor, Master Craftsman. So you proper like Aidan O'Brien, real classic horses. But just in recent years, I don't know, it's like, so you look at this, the last 10 renewals, sort of Painted Cliffs, Medicine Jack, Beckford, Van Beethoven, Siskin, Laws of Indices, Go Bears, Go Shartash, Buccaneer Fuerte. I don't know why the race just doesn't seem to be the race it was. There are reasons behind that, but like generally it's not maybe the school of superstars that it used to be.
No, that's true. Anyway, we'll move on to other things from last week. I thought there was some interesting action down in Killarney as well. And one horse that very interesting for me is Nürburg Ring, who won the Galway Hurdle last year. He won a novice chase down in Killarney, and now he's going ahead for the plate. I think he'd only be the second horse, would he, after Ansar, who won both the hurdle and the plate. Maybe I'm wrong. There might be another one back in the distant past. What did you make of that, Emma?
Yeah, it was hard to believe Nürburg Ring just breaking his maiden over fences. I suppose maybe back thinking back to the Cheltenham Festival, people thought he might have been getting plotted out for that, but got off the mark and goes to the plate now. We got the entries out for the plate last week. Was it Sunday last week anyway? He's been given 11-6 in the plate. Look, off a mark 146 over fences. He's a horse, obviously loves Galway. Look, he got maybe a little bit of a freebie at the start last year, but you can't beat Galway form going into the Galway Festival. And yeah, you'd imagine Nürburg Ring, he'll be short enough in the betting coming into it being a Galway hurdle and a Galway plate winner. But I think Jesse Evans has been put in the Galway plate as well. He obviously he placed 3 or 4 years in the Galway hurdle, so 3 years in the Galway hurdle. So we've got a Galway hurdle winner and a Galway hurdle consistent performer, I suppose, both showing up with a fair chance there. But yeah, Nürburg Ring, probably maybe a little bit underwhelming over fences so far, but look, to getting into the groove of it now. Yeah,
I think the traditionalists, as the joke goes, if the traditionalists were alive, Vinny, they'd be turning in their grave to have Jesse Evans, by so you think off the top of my head, and then you've Nürburg Ring, a son of Zoffany, whose last 2 runs were in Royal Ascot, second of Royal Ascot, and then won a small runner race at Killarney to be going for the Galway plate. I definitely got the impression from Noel Meade, like I was sweet on Jesse Evans with a view to the plate, and you absolutely need horses really with a bit in hand that are likely race, because it's all these handicap chases, they've nothing in hand at this stage, most of them. I got the impression from Noel Meade just talking to him at Bellewstown after he'd won at Tipperary. He's just not confident he gets the trip, and you can't really have, I don't know, Noel obviously winning the race last year. He knows he's not lost his ability to win a big race at Galway, but I don't think you can back a horse whose trainer really doesn't have faith in him getting the trip in a Galway plate.
There's another one. If we switch to the Galway hurdle, I was looking at the entries in it, a couple of English ones as well. We've Willful from John Joe O'Neill's, and we've Dice Ardinos, Fergal O'Brien. But I saw one of your old favourites in there, Johnny, Hello Neighbour. What would you think of that for a Galway hurdle?
Yeah, Hello Neighbour's been I kind of don't know what to make of him, in the sense that he's a horse who probably was not quite good enough maybe at the top level to go on and be the Triumph hurdle horse that he was, and I had him back to 33s for the Triumph, and his last run at Roscommon was was alarming really. He was sent off 11-4. It was a very interesting race for Roscommon. One thing that struck me a bit about Hello Neighbour as the season developed, at Cheltenham for me, he didn't really go through with his effort. He did at Punchestown, but I do feel that, you know, trainers of connections like these now, and this horse would have been bought for good money. They're looking at the Galway hurdle with the view to Joseph winning it with 4-year-olds and Willie winning it with 4-year-olds. That it's a good route to go down if you have a 4-year-old hurdler, because again, like the plate, horses might have a bit in hand. He's a very interesting runner, but I don't know. I didn't know what to make of that run at Roscommon the last day, because he had won his second start, wasn't it, at Roscommon, as a flat horse for Gavin, having won at Navan, And he just that one would have questions for me, but he's definitely if you're looking at trends for a horse, he's definitely the type for the race as a 4-year-old with who probably has more to offer. But yeah, it's hard to believe Galway's upon us this day week.
Yeah, absolutely. And just letting people know who are watching this show that next week we will have a Galway preview on the Monday. And then on Tuesday, the three of us will be back with Ronan Groom to have a chat about Galway in general and look back at what happened on the Monday and some of the betting trends from AK Bets and see how that went. And then we'll talk about some of the things that excite us about Galway. So we'll get into that in more detail next week. Anyway, we'll finish off this week with a horse to follow. I'll pick one first. We haven't discussed this, but I'd say there's a chance the three of us might have picked the same one. I don't know. Anyway, the one that got me was a boy named Susie, Donegal O'Brien, owned by Anna O'Brien. Wow, this was impressive. It was a median series auction type race where the median value of the sire at sales depends on the weight of it as well in the race. This was given a lot of weight away as well to some of them and won 3 lengths very impressively. There was lots of money for it beforehand. They knew what they had, and they definitely have a good one. What I thought was interesting was I thought the runner-up ran very well, which is called Bella Mano. Johnny Murta trains that filly. She was getting stones off this and still only came through into second, only got up on the line, I think, for second. I thought the winner was very impressive. What did you make of that one, Emma?
Yeah, like everything you said there, I'm really impressed. But hard to believe it was Anna's. I think someone reported it was Anna's first winner on her own colours as well. After the race, which obviously a big one for her. And you'd imagine it might be in different colours the next day because like you said, massively impressive. Yeah, that was definitely one of the shortlists. Look, I'll give a different one, and maybe I'll give a one who I thought might win next time. Yeah, one who was beaten in Killarney actually, who I saw. It was obviously a big week for John Murphy, who always does so well down in Killarney. Racked up plenty of winners and had a 1-2 as well. Was on the Wednesday or the Thursday, but Plaza at 10. I thought second start up for her. She was just beaten ahead by another one of Donegal O'Brien's, Drama Queen, in the 1 mile 3 maiden on the the Monday evening. She had one start before back in the Curragh back in June. She was 6th in a maiden, and interestingly enough, the horse who finished in front of her that day, who was 5th, won the mile maiden on the same day for John Murphy as well. So I just thought Plaza at 10, like even after one start, she's a 3-year-old, I know, but she looked a little bit green even going down around the hill in Killarney there. She rolled a bit off the bend, and maybe the more experienced rival just kind of got first run and got the better of her on the day. But I'd say she looks a filly well capable of winning over mile 10 furlongs, mile and a half. She's got a bit of ability and looks another one for John Murphy to look forward to, hopefully.
Great stuff. And what about you, Johnny?
Yeah, just I suppose on the John Murphy, I don't know what it is about Killarney, but the Anna O'Brien interview, the couple of things there, like in my work I was working for the race force at the time. I don't remember that many days distinctly in terms of working, but the day that Anna O'Brien suffered neck and back fractures in a fall at Killarney, that night always sticks to me because I don't know, I wasn't at the track, but I might have been on news that night or whatever, and really desperately hoping for information, and that night always stuck with me. If your daughter or son, and in particularly a daughter, I suppose, but either way, if your son or daughter were a rider, even on the flat, like you're never exempt from the threat of the danger of riding horses. And that night when I think I don't know, was GDPR a little bit more relaxed in those days, and as a journalist it got very hard actually to get information on jockeys who had suffered injuries subsequently because of data protection and so on and so forth. But I remember speaking to Adrian McGoldrick that night, and I'd say could have been midnight, maybe even further than that, and he was relaying that the good news was good on Anna, and that's always stuck with me because there was such a sense of worry about the extent of her injury. So the fact that she went back at Killarney, it's the first time I actually nearly remember her on TV since being interviewed since that night, but back at Killarney, and I thought she, just looking at the interview, I couldn't get over how much she looked like her dad. She was like, her manners, and she was absolutely the spit of him, and I'd say it was a very proud night for Aidan. But I'll never forget that night Anna had that incident in Killarney, and I thought the horse was a very strange name because it was one of those horses I'd call a filly, probably going into the races with a name like that. But best of luck to the O'Briens, and Dunick has done okay with 10 sovereigns. And this is a nice lead to my next horse. He's Electric, who is the horse that I'm going to put forward this weekend. He has a lovely pedigree, but to win a maiden first time out, Noelmead's horses at the moment, Flat and National Hunter, run very well, and I did a piece for Darragh O'Connor's racing annual there in recent years about Noel becoming more of a flat trainer than a jump trainer. He's doing very well to get good horses with the budget that he has. Like, he wouldn't have a big budget. I thought He's Electric was very good in that 1.2 maiden. He beat Walk the Highline, who was a 4-6 favourite, and Walk the Highline had run very, very well first time out at Gorn, was pretty well backed, like 4-6 squaff. And Colin Keane rode He's Electric. He was a little bit keen early, but he did everything right in the race by 10 sovereigns, but plenty of stamina on the dam side. And I do wonder what the long-term plan for this horse is. You're thinking with, like, he'd definitely be potentially a triumph hurdle horse if Noel wants to go down that route, but he just might be a bit better than that. I love the way he went through the race for a debutant. He's Electric was mine to take out, and as delighted to see Anna O'Brien have a nice horse in her hands as well.
Good stuff, yeah. Just I don't know how parents do that with their kids riding in races. I don't know how your dad and mum do it. Emma, when you were riding, I really don't understand it, because I know I have 2 daughters. Just them going to a nightclub was enough to keep me up all night. Never mind the thought of them being injured after a fall and helicoptered out of the track and everything else. Anyway,
it's a big challenge for a parent, like, because it's like, what do you want to get your kids into? Because, like, say if my son wants to get into, I like cycling, but like if he took cycling seriously and became good at it, it's very, very dangerous. So that's kind of, but you have to live your life as well, I suppose.
Dancing is always a safe one. That's what we do with our 2 daughters. Yeah, never a problem with dancing. Worst you can do is twist an ankle. Anyway, look, if you enjoyed the show, do subscribe to the channel and press the like button below if you're watching this on YouTube. And we'll be back again next week with 2 shows, a preview Monday and another weekly discussion show on the Tuesday. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.